sister.
Okay. Hey, it's Phil Wade, and we're here today with Bill and Kinga. Karen's holding the camera phone, and me. And today we're going to talk about the seller's disclosure. This is really a very important topic, and one, to kind of make sure you understand and sort of what the ramifications, repercussions potentially are. So just to kind of start with an overview. So the seller disclosure is to, basically help the seller identify any potential, defects, issues in their home, and is put out in kind of a questionnaire format for them to do that. So you as the agent, the listing agent, you never want to fill this out. That's like a huge no-no. You can't do that. They have to fill it out themselves. You can certainly, help them understand what the questions mean. If it's used correctly, it's a good document because it does tell the buyer, everything kind of about the house. So it's when it's not filled out correctly or the person doesn't fill out, quote, honestly, that's where maybe some issues, possibly can arise. So it's not a contract, it's just a disclosure. Yeah, it is not like a legal requirement in the state of Florida that someone completes this. What is a legal requirement is that that seller does disclose any and all material defects in their house. And again, this is a good way to kind of, ultimately get at it for the buyer. So the buyer, so as a buyer's agent, you're going to want to review this and you're going to want to get it. A lot of times you'll see, there isn't one. You need to ask for one. You want that seller to kind of, tell you what they know about their house because, they're signing off. And if they then subsequently there's a problem, we're going to talk about some problems later that kind of have come out. You have this document, where they basically said, they're in essence caught in a lie. Which if there is an issue can ultimately kind of help you. But for the buyer and as the buyer's agent, you want to make sure you read this, you understand it. If there's anything that looks funky or strange, you need to ask the listing agent about it, kind of make sure that you and your client understands it. If there isn't one, or sometimes have you ever had one where they check every box as don't know, right? Or they line it out and say, I never lived there. You ever get one of those?
Yeah.
Right? Yep, that happens all the time, right? So what does that actually mean? Well, that means that, again, like they can still fill it out even though they live there. Like if they have a tenant in there and there's a problem, who does the tenant call? The owner, right? So the owner knows about, they're just, wanting to somehow kind of get off the hook, So again, if they've done it and that's how they filled it out and that's the best we can do, then, we kind of need to be a little bit more skeptical about, what's going on with that property because they're not really willing to tell you anything. And you can't, sort of on the face of it, believe that they're honest people. Because again, we're going to talk about some examples where we found people not to be that way. So again, but if you're so we'll talk a little bit more about the listing side now. So if you're the listing agent, you're going to get your client to fill this out. And like they might ask you some questions because sometimes, this form isn't the most sort of straightforward. So there can be some, questions in there where you don't know whether to answer no or don't know. But you kind of work with them. But the goal is that it identifies any problems right in the house. And you as the agent, you might have been in that house before. You saw a big water leak, and now they're ready to to list it, and they fix that leak. Do you think that should be disclosed?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So you just put in there, there was a leak. Leak fixed, that way the buyer, because maybe now there's mold and the inspector finds that, and this way it's been disclosed. And we always want to kind of err on the side of more disclosure. And then if you get the property under agreement and then something comes up or something you want to update this, or even if it isn't under agreement and between the time this was filled out and maybe the house is taking a little bit to sell, something happens, you have them just sign and update it. We talked a little bit about, not living in the property isn't a reason, not to complete this form. And again, if you're starting to get maybe the sense that, they're not completely honest or how they're answering a question, doesn't, call me. And, we need to decide whether, this is people we even want to be involved with because, again, they're just people out there that really are trying to pull the wool over that buyer's eyes for money. I mean, it always comes down to that. Usually these defects, make the property worth a little less. That's why they don't want to disclose them, so they get more money, which again is not great. And then, as the buyer's agent, you're going to review this with your buyer. If there is no disclosure, you're going to ask to get one. You're going to be skeptical of kind of how the questions are answered and actually read it and look at it. And then if there's no seller's disclosure provided, you need to tell your buyer what the repercussions of that are, that they're not really telling us anything about that house. You need to probably tell the home inspector there was no seller's disclosure, so that he can be extra careful, in his work. And again, having that really good home inspector is critical. Another thing, and again, do you go to all your home inspections?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, I know sometimes some agents don't go. They wait for the summary report. It's really not the same as actually being there, so it's highly advisable that you go. What I do when I'm there is basically work. I'm doing some other work or I'm on my phone, whatever, because it is not the most exciting thing to kind of go through.
Someone asked a question.
Okay, yeah, what is it? Question.
Do you use all the same forms when house failed home inspection?
Can you clarify that?
Can you clarify what you mean, Sarah? I guess we could keep going and then come back to it.
Wait for that question to kind of get a little further clarification on. So you just, no disclosure, you're the buyer's agent, extra skeptical, right? That this, it's the first sign that maybe you're dealing with somebody that's not, quite as upfront as they should be. So here we're going to talk now quickly a little bit about, a couple examples of, inadequate disclosure. So in all these cases, we were in the buyer agent side. So the first one is, you're in a house or it's a townhouse, and you open the living room door, and it goes out to a lanai, right? 100 square foot lanai, and then you turn on the light switch, and it turns on the light and the fan on the lanai. Well, come to find out, when the survey comes back, the lanai is on somebody else's property, right? Now, that's like a clear case where that listing agent should have disclosed that. All right, because a reasonable person assumes that lanai is part of that property. So what he did to make matters even worse, at least in my opinion, was he didn't take any pictures of the lanai. He didn't talk about the lanai in the write-up, right, in his remarks. Now it's selling feature. Most agents would have done that, right? So he thinks that because I didn't take pictures of it and I didn't talk about it, that I'm okay. No, you're not okay. That's how you get in trouble as an agent. He should have told, and then what happened, just to kind of embellish the story a little more, no seller's disclosure. We got him to sign the seller's disclosure, and then, there was a section in here on easements and encroachment. So basically there was an easement, about that porch. He checked don't know, doesn't know. What is it? Don't know. So unfortunately, the buyer's agent didn't really press on in terms of what do you mean about don't know? Because all the other questions are answered yes or no, but this one that happened to kind of pertain to the porch, they answered don't know. Subsequently, we find out, the porch is on somebody else's property, potential problem. But again, the listing agent, the buyer's agent, did everything he could do. I mean, he asked all the right questions. Everything was done correctly, but the listing agent, again, is just in the wrong. He's thinking that if I tell somebody that this porch isn't part, the house is going to be worse. Yeah, it's
Did
worse.
they know about it for sure, the listing agent and the
you
seller?
You never really know 100% for sure, but I would guess.
Because maybe there's no survey?
It came out of the survey. That's kind of where.
But did they have a prior survey?
They had a prior survey.
Oh, they did.
Well, again, I mean, we know they had one done because the same survey company did it.
Okay.
So they had a survey. We talked to the neighbor. He knew. They knew the listing agent. Because, again, what told me the listing agent knew is no pictures, no mention of it. Like, why would you do that? Like, who does that? No, like, it's a selling feature. Like, so it kind of, oh, no, he said if I didn't, I left it out, then no, that's not how it works. The next one is kind of similar to that. So there's a washer dryer hookup in a condo. Like, have we ever done anything? You guys know, what is it? Top of the world? Anybody?
On top of the world.
Top of the world. Everybody kind of knows, right? 5,000 units. So, I'm out with a buyer. This is a personal experience. I'm out with a buyer. We're in a unit. She likes the unit. We put an offer in. There's a washer dryer hookup in the closet. She's like, great. That's really a big selling feature for her. So I actually we're going to agreement. I get the condo docs. I asked another agent who's not here today, can you send me the condo docs? He goes, oh yeah, no problem, because he had done some transactions over there. And then he goes, when she has the management questionnaire, they're going to, the interview, they're going to ask her, is there a washer dryer hookup in the unit? And I'm like, okay. Well, he goes, oh, they're all illegal. Okay, so I don't know, my client doesn't know. So I call up the listing agent, what's up with the washer dryer hookup? Oh yeah, it is illegal. You notice how I didn't mention it, or I didn't take any pictures of it. Oh, and they had a licensed plumber put it in. That should have been disclosed. That should be told that, think of it like this. If the buyer finds out later or after they've closed, and they're mad or upset, then, it should have been disclosed. Because my client, it didn't end up going forward. But if she had bought that and then, it had to be ripped out, she's not a happy camper. So again, just because you don't put it in the pictures or you don't, mention it in the write-up, and it's there, it's still not right. The question is, would a reasonable buyer assume everything is okay? And the answer there was yes, so it should have been disclosed. Another one, and this one again, so on the questionnaire it talks about, are there any issues with pests? Right here, has the property been treated for termites? Are there any pest problems? They answer no. The answer is no. Home inspection, pest inspection, close on the unit. Then the lady's going to put in, new air handler, which is up in the ceiling. So they have to take down some panels, and then 10 rat traps fall down from the ceiling.
Wow. Rats are pests.
Rats are pests. They knew they had a rat problem. Their place was come to find out, infested with rats. The actual listing agent, who was a broker, he knew it as well, because he kind of told us that he knew it, and then kind of quickly cut off all communication. So again, just clearly wrong. Clearly trying, in all three of those examples, the seller trying to pull the wool over the buyer's eyes, and then there's an agent sort of culpable, in it all. So again, as the listing agent, if you start to see that, something's not right, that you think should be, disclosed, and they're not willing to disclose it, we have to either withdraw from that listing. Question?
Yeah, I have a few.
Okay.
So Sarah had clarified
Yeah.
what she said. She said, first she said, do you use all the same forms when house failed home inspection? Then she said, they want to buy the home despite failing the home inspection. Do I use the same sale and buyer forms? How do I cover my own end when the buyer still wants to proceed and pay cash for the home after it failed inspection?
Well, I guess, it doesn't really fail inspection. There might be issues that come out of the inspection that ultimately the buyer is aware of. So those are all fine. It's when the buyer's, the thing that is problematic is when the buyer's not aware of it. That the home, in the case with the pests here, there was a pest inspection. That pest inspector missed the pests, right? I mean, you're kind of relying on somebody for their expertise. So, so again, if there's a home inspection and all these things are identified and the buyer is good with that, then they're disclosed. It's again, if you read the language, it talks about you know, home, you know, disclose to the buyer all known facts that materially affect the value of the property that are not readily observable or known to the buyer. So it's stuff that's not, you can't see or they don't know. So if they know about it, then it's fine. That's actually good. That's why you do all the inspections. It's when the stuff isn't fine.
Okay, and there's one more question. If a person dies in a home, does this have to be written on the disclosures?
You know, it's called a stigmatized home. I mean, I'd have to go back and see what the law. Some states have different laws. I mean, you can Google it, stigmatized home in Florida, see what it says. I'll do that and kind of follow up with everybody, but I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Okay. So again, in summary, you know, any questions here in the room? No. So in summary, you know, if you're the listing agent, you need to be skeptical. You need to really make sure you're understanding how your buyer's filling this out, how they're answering these questions, and that they're answering them, you know, correctly. If you see things, you know, that need to be, you know, brought to the attention, you know, of the buyer. Like I had an agent call me yesterday. There was a leak in the air conditioning. They fixed it. He's worried that it wet the rug. And now they're going to be ripping it. I think they, for some reason, wanted to rip up the rug. So I said, yeah, call your seller, ask them what they've done. Maybe it's been fixed, and it had been. And they had actually gone as far as having a mold test, and they had the results from the mold test. So again, disclose it, give it to the buyer. You know, you're protected. It's when you don't, you know, when you don't give it to the buyer. I mean, I know Claren had a situation when she bought a house, you know, where on the seller disclosure that talked about the drainage, right? The drainage, they said there's no drainage issues. Well, interesting enough, they sell their house in December during the dry season. Then the wet season comes when it rains, and all the water kind of comes like pouring in, you know, drains into the yard. Again, somebody, like, they're just not being truthful. They're just, you know, and again, did the agent know? It's hard to know. But again, if sort of she sees, you know, it rains and then all the water, you know, she needs to talk to her client about it and get it disclosed correctly.
What about, I have a quick question.
Okay.
How much responsibility does the home inspector have for any issues that came up after the inspection that somebody didn't find? Like you just said that one of the inspector didn't see the rats and clearly.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, obviously, you know, if you're a home inspector or a pest inspector, you do have liability, right? I mean, you are out there, and it's basically that. And again, I don't know exactly what their liability is per se, but I mean, there are certain standards, like just like there are for realtors, in terms of like what we do, how we proceed, and you know, so if the home inspector misses it, you know, it's potentially they have some liability as well. What ends up happening, unfortunately, in these situations, usually, and it's really never happened to me, but generally speaking, if there's a problem, everybody kind of gets involved, the agents, the inspectors, you know, so you don't really want it to ever, and there's no need for it. You know, but where the problem really comes is when in the three examples I gave. So in those three examples, not only did the seller not tell the truth, right? The listing agent knew they were not telling the truth and didn't disclose it correctly, right? That somehow either glossed over it, thought it wasn't important, didn't watch my videos, you know, I don't know what it is, you know, but that's like, I mean, that's how you have problems, and who needs problems? I mean, the business is hard enough, right? I mean, you know, so you know, that's where the issues come, where they kind of know something. Okay, there's something wrong with this property, and again, the question is, you know, if the buyer will find out because they're going to live there, and you know, that's all going to come to light, and unfortunately, you know, that's when it ends up being an issue. So yeah, I mean, everybody has a little bit of liability there, but so again, the thing is, over disclose, be skeptical. You're in these houses, you know, check them out, but I mean, don't believe everybody, you know, I mean, everybody is above board that, you know, unfortunately we're dealing with. Because again, it comes down to money. Some people, you know, they basically, you know, they use a bad word, they whore themselves for the money. They don't want to tell, about the issue because it's going to make their property worth a little less. Oh, I can, sleaze by. So we don't want to be involved with people like that.
Our duties as listing agents, even if the seller says, no, I'm not going to disclose that, we're obligated to disclose it. So I would just tell the seller, hey, you're not going to disclose it, but I have to as a listing agent. And the potential buyer is still going to know. So
yeah. Well, hopefully they've given you the listing. I mean, that's kind of what ultimately happens. And I think sometimes it can kind of come down to, and again, the three examples, like, you don't really know like what the interaction was between the listing agent and the seller, but it seems somehow, on the surface, they're kind of not doing their job and not understanding what their job is. And their job is that, we're selling things so people are buying things with their eyes wide open. They understand what they're buying. And when you're trying to hide things, it's a problem. Any last questions? All right, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.